This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas. I have done several videos about the Needle Beetle, and I've done videos about how to do various patterning designs on a non-patterning machine. Now, I'll put some links up to my videos so that you can see more about the Needle Beetle and perhaps your machine. And I'm doing a Needle Beetle today that was designed to work on the Brother KX350. And this is my KX350 that's been sitting on a shelf a little while. In fact, this afternoon it had to have a new sponge strip. So just something to mention to you, if you've got a machine you don't use all the time, you want your needles to be held down a little bit by the sponge strip and to not just float around but to stay where they belong. If you can find one of these, this is a wonderful machine. It's very, very similar to the LK150, but it has 66 needles on each side of 0, so that's what, 132 needles? And it is a 7mm machine, so it's a little unusual. It's in between a mid-gauge and a bulky. It takes a lot of different kinds of yarn. This is the kind of machine that you could take with you to a hotel or in an RV because it doesn't weigh much, it's not real big, and you could still have a great time knitting and make beautiful knits. And I'm just really excited that now we can get a Needle Beetle for this one. This one will do an 8-stitch pattern. So I just did a video using my girlfriend's convertible machine, which is a plastic bed standard gauge, and I got 16 stitch wide patterns. Well, that was exciting, but we can get a pretty exciting pattern with 8 stitches. All you need is a good chart and a little patience. And so I've got a chart here that is 16 rows tall and 8 stitches wide, and I think it's really cute. Now, if you want more charts, you can go to my Facebook group and join up, because I'm going to be putting some charts up over there for Needle Beetle users. Gee, I almost said Needle Beetlers. Anyway, I'll put some charts up there. We can have some fun with this. You can get more out of your little portable plastic bed machine. Now, the Needle Beetles are available from Chris Crafter at www.chriskrafter.com, and you need to get the one that fits your machine. Sorry folks, they don't have them for metal bed machines, just for certain machines. So they have one for this KX350. They have one for the 395 I was using the other day. They have one for the LK150. So let's dive in. Now, Fair Isle is tricky on a machine like this because it only carries one color of yarn. Since it only carries one color, we have to make 2 trips across for each row. A trip with one color, a trip with the other color. Now, the chart I'm using is this chart. It is 8 stitches wide, but it is 16 rows tall. And these are the row numbers here. But I also gave myself a little cheat sheet of row counter numbers. 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and so forth. And those row counter numbers make it easier for me to keep my place the whole time I'm working. I'm going to cast on, and just a quick cast on with this dark green yarn, and I want 24 stitches on each side of 0. That'll give me a multiple of 8 stitches. So I've just brought out every other needle, and I'm going to go ahead and knit across with the green yarn. And then I'm hanging a clothespin on the loose end, hanging the Brother 350 comb, and I am using the center here of the comb to line up with the 0 on the needle bed so I can center it, and it has a slot for a weight, and if I weren't such a habitual clothespin user, I could certainly use this nice yarn clip. Now I want to go to 24 here. I want 48 stitches, and I've brought out my in-betweens plus one extra on the left. If I didn't bring out the extra, I'd have only had 23. And I'm going to knit a few rows. Now I'm going to tighten up my tension. Since this is a group 3 yarn, I'm going down to tension 3. And that tension 3 in group 3, that's a coincidence. I'm just doing one of the tighter tensions because it's not the heaviest yarn this machine will knit. Now, I am going to start on the right-hand side of the machine and do the first row in the chart. And to help myself, I'm going to run my row counter down to 001. Then each time I start a row, I can look at the number here and make sure I'm on the right row on the chart. And so for this first one, it's rows 1 and 2 because it takes 2 passes of the carriage to get 2 colors put in. And I'm currently threaded with the darker color. Now, the color that I want to knit will knit if it's in the back. So when I pick out the needles, I'm going to want those needles for the color I've got threaded to be in the back. I also have to get my carriage settings squared away. So let's look at that briefly. When I go to the left, I want to not knit held needles. So I'm popping this down to hold. And I want to knit all the needles in the back on the first pass. And then on the second pass, when I go to the right, I'm going to knit the held needles. So I've got this in, so it will knit them. And I want to slip the needles in the back, so I've got it in P for part. So right now it is going to knit the needles in the back, and I'm going to count out my first row of stitches. Now normally you would have to count this repeat of 8 all the way across, but what the Needle Beetle does is it copies it for you. You put in one repeat of 8 and then it copies it exactly all the way over. Let's count our first row. I put the row counter on 1, my way of cheating. I haven't knitted 1 yet, but I want to be able to look at this, see the 1, look at the chart, see the 1, and say, okay, I've got my ruler on the correct row. And my carriage is threaded with the green. So I want to knit the dark stitches. Well, the stitches that knit are the ones in the back. So I have to bring the stitches I don't want to knit forward. I'm going to do them later. So I don't want to knit this white, so I bring it forward right here. And then I want to knit those 2, so I leave them back, and then this next one I bring forward. And then another one I want to knit and one I don't want to knit. The last 2 are dark, numbers 7 and 8, which is good. I always check my last needle. I have marked my 8th needle from the right with this pink Crayola washable marker, and it's very visible to me which needle is 8, and since I'm knitting the dark is back, and I've counted properly. Now I take the Needle Beetle and I put it on so that this ridge goes into the deep well behind the needle butts. Just like that. That lines it up. This front area here covers the blue needle number strip, and this tail, which flicks the needles up into the selected position, it always goes on the right. It's a little hard to see on camera, but there is an arrow here pointing left. The Needle Beetle only goes one way. So I'm going to slide it to the left, and I'm using my hand to hold the knitting against the needle bed. Because of the size of the yarn, the size of the needles, the yarn's wanting to come on out with the needle, and it's better if I hold it back against the bed. So now I've copied my pattern all the way across, and I knit across with the green, and it knitted only the stitches in the back. The stitches in the front, it just laid the yarn on top. Let's zoom in and look at that. So zooming in to look at that, here's a stitch that was pulled out that it did not knit, and it laid the yarn on it. And so that's what I want. I want some floats. And it's going to be fine. It's going to slide off the end of the needle when it knits. It's not going to make overly loose floats, which I was, a little concerned about, but it works fine with this particular machine. So I am taking the green out of the feeder. Every time the carriage is on the left, I am going to change the color. And every time the carriage is on the right, I'm going to change the row. So now I'm on white. And what's it going to do with the white? It's going to knit all the needles that are sticking out, because that is how I have the carriage set. So over I go with the white. And let's go ahead and count out the next row. Now, I mentioned earlier that whenever you're on the right, you have to move the row up on the chart. So I'm doing that. And now my little cheater row counter number column says 3, 4. Sure enough, I'm on 3. So you see how the row counter helps me make sure I'm on the right row on the chart, because interruptions happen and you want to get a kind of a rhythm going and be accurate and have this not be too difficult at all. Now, this time the counting is different because I'm threaded with white. Since we change color every 2 rows, this time I'm going to be white. Next time I'm on the right, I'm going to be working with green. So the white needles are the ones I want in the back. So I'm going to pull out the dark needles. So the first 2 come out. I leave one back and I pull one out. Leave one back, pull one out, and the last one comes out, and I double check my last needle is dark, and it's not going to knit because I'm threaded with white, so my counting is good. Put the Needle Beetle on, and I'm going to slide it across and do the needle selection all the way across. Now, there's something I want to mention to you. Do you want beautiful ends on your work? If you do, arrange for your ends to knit each time. When you're going to the left, when the machine is knitting the needles that are back, to get the end needles to knit, push them back like that, halfway back, and those guys will knit. Now I'm going to change yarn because I'm on the left. I'm going to put the green yarn in. My carriage is set on the left, and when it goes to the right, it's going to knit all the out needles, all the forward needles. So I bring out those end needles and it will knit them. So there you go. I am on row counter 5, and I'm on the right, and I need to slide my ruler up so that my cheater row counter number is 5 and 6. I'm threaded with green. I promised you that this time when I was on the right, I'd have green. So I don't want to knit the white ones, and the ones I don't want to knit this first of 2 passes, I need to pull out. So I'm pulling this second needle because it's a white spot, and then one back, and then pull 3, and then one back, and then pull 1. My end needle is a white. I always check that. and use the beetle to do all my counting. And then my end needles are going to knit because they're already back. So I can go ahead and go across. I'm on the left. Whenever I'm on the left, I swap the yarn. Now note, this green yarn happens to be coming from the right upper take-up spring. The top antenna on the right has the green. So I'm bringing the green over to my right and hanging it under the needle bed on my right. And it will hang out over there while I do the white. And I'm taking my white from behind the machine on the left and threading it. And now it's going to knit all the needles that are forward. And I'm going to pull the end needles so it knits them too. Now you can't pull them first. You have to do the patterning and then you can pull them. And when I say patterning, I mean the needle counting. Then you just mess with the end needles, leave the others alone. So there I go, and I have gotten to row counter 7. I'm on the right, so I have to move my ruler up, and it says 7, 8, it says 7 there. Great. And I have white threaded in the machine. So I want to pull the needles forward that are dark because it's going to knit the needles that are back. So this second needle comes forward, skip 5 white needles, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this one, the last needle, comes forward. And as I mentioned, I check that last needle. It's going to be dark like it's supposed to be. Usually if I get off count, I'm off on the last one I count. So this is a way for me to keep myself straight, a little self-checking mechanism. And now I'm going to copy that design all the way across the bed. Now my end needles are back, so they're going to knit this row. So over I go, swap my yarn. Let's put the green in instead. And if I want the green needles to knit, since I'm going to the right and it's going to knit the needles that are out and ignore the needles that are back, I'm going to pull out these end needles and knit back. Now you'll note I'm pulling up on the yarn as I approach. That's because pulling the yarn all the way over and hanging it under the machine took all the tension off. I could also increase the tension by pulling the yarn down back there. Your choice. They both work. Now I'm on row counter 9, and whenever my carriage is on the right, I slide the ruler up and I look at the 9 and I look at the 9 in my column that's for row counter numbers. And I am going to pull out the needles I don't want to knit with this green that's currently threaded. So I need to pull the second, third, and fourth needles. So 1 back, 3 forward, 1 back, 3 forward. My last needle on the left is a white needle. And I do my counting with the Needle Beetle. My end needles are back, so they're going to knit, and over I go. That does my green. When I'm on the left, I change colors. If I want the needles as I go to the right to knit, then I can pull those end needles and they'll knit. This gives me a very good selvage stitch that can go in the seam. It also keeps it from having any kind of gap where the yarn started away from the edge. It's just a lazy way to fix up my end needles. I'm just going to do this once or twice more and do the rest off camera. But I think that you will certainly be able to follow it because it's the same. I am on row 11. Carriage is on the right. I have to slide the ruler up. It says 11, 12, and I am threaded with white. The needles that are back will knit, so these 3 need to be back, so they'll knit. The next 3 need to be out, so they don't knit, and the next 2 back, so that they will knit in the white. Oh, I miscounted, and I noticed it when I got to that 8th needle, I was off. So when you're off, here's what you do. Put these back and do it again. See, I needed to leave 3 back, not 2. And then I needed to pull 3 because I don't want to knit the dark. And then I want 2 back. And that's how it ought to be. That's counted properly. You got to take your time with this. And run the beetle. And the end stitches are back. They're going to knit. And then, whenever I'm on the left, I swap my color. So I'm putting the green in. This time I'll show you the tighten it up using the pull method. See, I'm just pulling it down, and that tightens it up. And then I'm going to knit back with the green. Now, if I want the end needles to knit, which I do, I'm going to pull them. That's what I do when I go to the right, because everything that's in hold is going to knit. Now, I'm just going to do the rest of it off camera. Here's my finished sample using the green and white with this chart. And I think that'll really give you an idea what striking patterns you can do with only 8 stitches. And I've got some more 8-stitch charts that I'm putting in my Facebook group, Knitting with Diana Sullivan, so you can go and see those. Here's one that I think is a little bit Christmassy that'll be a fun one. I've got quite a few that I'll put up. Anyway, there is plenty that you can do in terms of Fair Isle with the Needle Beetle and an ordinary plastic bed machine. So I hope you'll doodle and explore and see a whole new side of your plastic bed machine.